Hey, folks, welcome into another episode of A Nichols Worth. Guess what? I'm your host, Keaton Nichols. You can catch me everywhere on the socials at Keaton D. Nichols. That's at Keaton D. Nichols. A couple of people already tuning in on the Instagram. You can also check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to the show right now. YouTube.com/A Nichols Worth. YouTube.com/A Nichols Worth. Best way to listen to the show live or archived episodes in case you miss one throughout the week. We do this every Monday, Wednesday, and today being Friday. Happy Friday to everyone out there. Remember to like this post. Remember to share it on your timelines if you're on one of those shareable sort of outlets, because you never know. Maybe somebody else might want to jump into the conversation tonight, and you get bonus points for doing so. If you're asking yourself, what do I use these bonus points for? You are indeed asking the right questions. But anyway, I wanted to talk about a few things tonight. I'll talk about Deshaun Watson here in just a second, because obviously there's a lot happening surrounding his situation. And I'm hoping that we as a society, I'm not talking about we as men or we as black people or I'm just talking about we as a society, as an American society, let's say, learn from some of the mistakes that we've made, or learn from some of the errors that I think we as a collective have made. And especially those in the sports world, or those that call themselves fans of the sports world as well. So we'll get into that in just a second. First up, I'm sure you guys saw the clip today of Joe Biden stumbling up the stairs. Sorry to my Instagram folks, but you won't have this visual aid as a part of this. Anyway, Joe Biden's been out parading his $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. And also, sort of promoting it in the same sort of way. It is a bit of a, sort of pat on the back, like, hey, we're celebrating this awesome thing, this historic thing that we did, but also to, sort of help drive the idea, let people know, unlike he said, unlike Barack Obama, I don't know, that's kind of like his comparison thing, that this is a big deal, that the thing that the Democrats did was a big deal. But anyway, he was traveling back up the stairs onto Air Force One when, let's see if we can cue it up. Do we have it? Oh, there it is. Let's get it on the bigger screen there. You can see it right there. Joe Biden's coming up the steps, and boom, there's 1, 2, and then a third one right there as well. A lot of people seeing this, and they're like, whoa, man, this is really not a good look for Joe Biden, because it makes him look kind of old and feeble. First of all, there's like the petty level of politics. And if anyone's been following politics, you know that Trump has tripped on a number of occasions on the stairs, on ramps, on, other things that sort of change elevation at one's, point of walk or whatever. It's happened. And so there's a bunch of petty, disagreements, people saying, aha, see, that's why you don't make fun of Trump, because look at you, blah, 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 whatever. That was fun for a little bit. But I think that, the other layer of things, and Black Twitter kind of got a hold of this, as they oftentimes do, and started making some memes. Joe Biden, first of all, is fine. He's okay. He did have some foot surgery a few months ago. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. Maybe he just tripped. Like I trip sometimes. Everybody trips sometimes. When you're old, I understand you trip more. That's something I'll let you guys in on whenever I actually get old, but it happens, whatever. But I think what a lot of people picked up on was like, hey, is Joe kind of losing it? Like, should we be looking towards the vice president? Oh yeah, that's right. The vice president is Kamala Harris. Not only did we elect Joe Biden, but we also elected Kamala Harris. And this was a really crucial point. It's something that I pointed out on the show last season, in season 2. It's that one of the biggest impacts of the Biden presidency, or the election of Joe Biden to the White House, is that Kamala Harris got into the White House too. Kamala Harris rather, it was somebody who was not like widely liked in politics. She's a very good politician, I think. I think she's fully qualified. She has all the qualifications and more to be president of the United States. I've seen that for sure. But in terms of, sort of this other kind of stuff that we talk about whenever we mention politics, some of these soft skills, some of these likability politics, the things that I've argued time and time again really just don't matter at all. These are the things that sort of push Kamala Harris from the sort of ring of honor that oftentimes, future presidents from either party are kind of picked from. And I do think that that's kind of hokey. Like, there are legitimate reasons maybe not to like Kamala Harris from a political perspective, but I think many of the dislike for Kamala Harris and many other women in politics, especially women that reach her level of politics, seems to be the same kind of criticism, seems to be the same kinds of things. And it has nothing to do with her ability to be president, and it has almost everything to do with her likability. Something that we don't discuss as much with the guys that run for president, but we do, but not really as much. So that is something that the Democrats would love to put on their record. The Democrats would love to say, look, the first woman president, we did that, right? Like, she was a member of our party, and we orchestrated the ways for that to happen. But I think seeing what happened in 2016 for the Democrats was kind of like shell shock for them in many ways. They committed to Hillary Clinton. That's fine. She was the better of the two candidates that we wound up with, in my opinion. But they settled in on Hillary Clinton with this idea that America would be bigger than the bigotry and the hate and the oppression that previously preceded it, right? Like, the same thing that happened with Barack Obama was going to happen with Hillary Clinton as well. The Democrats banked on that, and they kind of lost, right? There's interference and other stuff, we know that, but in general, the Democrats kind of lost that fight. And a lot of that fight was lost with people who didn't even particularly like Trump all that much, or Republicans, or really politics for that matter. But they seem to have a real big problem with being led by, so to speak, or being or living in a country rather, whose president was a woman. That seemed to be like a real big sticking point for a lot of voters, something that has absolutely nothing, again, to do with the ability to be president or to do the job of a president. But it still had a big impact. And in politics, it's all about what you can show, right? Not about what actually is. It's about what you can show. And I think the Democrats right now at this point would love for Kamala Harris rather, to be president of the United States, or a woman, and especially a woman of color. I think the Democrats would love that. But seeing what happened in 2016, just 4 years ago, this is not ancient history here, but just 4 years ago, we saw America as a united unit basically reject Hillary Clinton as president. Now, we know that more votes went to Hillary Clinton. I know that. But the election was lost. That wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't even supposed to be close. Not only was it close, but the other guy actually won. And that's something that I think the Democrats are going to remember. So as Kamala Harris sits in slot number 2, so to speak, as Joe Biden trips up the stairs today, we're all kind of reminded of this. If you listen to his speech, I guess this would have been Thursday. He had another press conference in which he referred to, it was a Freudian slip, but he referred to Kamala Harris as President Harris, and he didn't necessarily correct himself either. These are the kind of little slips that remind us, hey, Kamala Harris is really next up. My prediction was that, look, by 2024, by the time that we are talking about elections in 2024, Joe Biden will be approximately 82, 83, somewhere around that years old, 82 or 83 years old. I don't believe that the Democrats have any intention of running Joe Biden for another term, which means who's next up? Nobody else but Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris will be running for president in 2024. And it didn't take today's events necessarily to wake anyone's eyes up to that concept, but it should be noted that that's the plan for 2024. That's who's going to be leading out and heading out the Democrats. Joe Biden is in effect acting as a Trojan horse for Kamala Harris to reach the stage that she's at now, because it's likely that American voters, the same American voters that elected to have Donald Trump serve as president of the United States, would likely not be exactly, quote unquote, ready to elect a black woman to the highest office in the land on their own. If this strategy works from the Democrats, I think that the overall impact is greater than the sort of political strategy that got her there. Like, I don't like politics. I think it's a big game. And I think that it's a game that's playing with real life things, real life factors. And that means real life itself. And so I don't like that game of politics itself, but if she gets there, if that is what ends up happening, I think that the overall impact of her being president would outshine sort of any sort of negative that could come as a result of her being there because of politics. That's all. So something to keep an eye on. If you have any comments, by the way, you can leave them in the comments section of whatever stream you are watching: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. I see some folks in on the Instagram as well. Shout out to the folks tuning in on IG. Make sure you give this a share on your timelines too, if you are just now hearing it. Now, my next story, I did want to talk about Deshaun Watson tonight. Over the last few days, this situation with Deshaun Watson, NFL quarterback of the Houston Texans, has certainly taken, I don't want to say an interesting turn. I don't know if that's the right word, but it has taken a turn. So, excuse me, since we hadn't officially talked about it here on the show, I did want to discuss this. Deshaun Watson, as some of you know, is a quarterback for the Houston Texans. He's considered a star, so to speak. He's one of the better players, one of the best players in the league, and certainly one of the most high-valued players in the league as well. He's in the middle of a trade dispute right now between he and his team. I was talking about that, the Texans. Essentially, he wants to be traded, without getting too deep into it. He wants to be traded. The organization doesn't want to trade him because he's a good player, and it's kind of led to a contract dispute. I'm really simplifying that matter, but that's really kind of what it comes down to. It's a contractual kind of dispute. But anyway, none of that really matters much within the context of what we're talking about tonight related to Deshaun Watson, because in case you haven't heard, Houston area lawyer Tony Busby said during a news press conference Friday that he will be filing an additional 5 lawsuits against Deshaun Watson, bringing the total number of cases to 12, alleging inappropriate conduct and sexual assault by the Texans quarterback. That's the news here. Now, this news has grown since the beginning of the week. It was, I believe, initially 3 lawsuits that were filed with this lawyer that was announced on Twitter. Now, this is usually the part in the program where we kind of, not we per se, but when, you kind of break down and you say, well, do you think, basically in so many words, do you think he did it or do you think he didn't? Do you think there's enough evidence here to charge? Do you think there will be criminal charges? Do you think, there's a number of questions that I've seen in this situation. I've been noticing when this situation comes up, we kind of split right here in the conversation, right after you figure out who this person is, how high profile of a person that this is. The next sort of steps become like, okay, did he do it or not? Do you think that he's innocent or not? Tremendously wrong questions. I talked about this a lot during the situation. I shouldn't say the situation with Bill Cosby. But covering that trial as a radio journalist during that time, and having an opportunity to talk about that in a talk format as well, it was kind of shocking. And, to me, that this many people would be so quick to sort of, focus on the expose part of the story, the raunchy, the sort of messy details of the story, instead of the thing that was sort of at the central point of this for me, which was sexual misconduct, right? Like, sexual misconduct is a very serious thing, and the varying levels of it at any point and at any level is a very serious thing. And I think something that sort of happens, unfortunately, again, when we get to this point in the story about a person, it's like high profile individuals that have sexual misconduct allegations levied against them. We tend to focus on the allegations, what the allegations might do to the reputation. As I explained, Deshaun Watson is not only a top tier NFL, player, right? Like, not only is he a top tier NFL player, but he's in the middle of this trade dispute too. Right, where he wants to be traded. The team doesn't want to trade him. There's a lot of eyes on him right now. There's a lot of focus and a lot of attention on him right now. This is a high profile case in all forms and fashions. And it becomes more interesting to sports fans, for example, which I see this in the comment section. I see this in the general chatter and conversation about these kinds of issues when this kind of thing comes up with an athlete. But sports fans often tend to go right towards that. Well, do you think he's innocent? Well, because, this could really hurt his draft stock, or this could really hurt his chances of being traded. or this could really hurt the value that another team is going to pay him whenever he finds, that's the conversation that ends up breaking out. And it's like, wait a minute, hang on. Out of all of this, all of this news that we just, sort of experienced here, the first thing that we, come to is that maybe this might impact something about fantasy football, or maybe this impacts my favorite team that might pick him up or something like that. And I think that is just the wrong sort of energy to bring to this situation. Why? Because none of us were there. 99% of the world, 99.9999% of the world was not involved in whatever happened between Deshaun Watson and these women that are levying these allegations. We don't know. We are not lawyers on the case. We do not get to have a say as to what happens here. And when we do, I think when we do kind of throw our thoughts in there, when we say before we, when all of us 99% that don't really matter in the situation, when we start throwing our allegations in there, we start throwing our opinions in there. Oh, I think Deshaun's innocent, or I think he's clean because of this. It muddies the water of the original conversation, which is sexual misconduct took place. And it's not ultimately, the biggest story is not what happens to the perpetrator in this situation, or what punishment is going to be levied on the perpetrator. Is it going to be a slap on the wrist, or how are we treating this person too harshly? Do we criminalize black men before we know enough facts? Like, there's a lot of conversations that sort of split at this point. But I think the central point that we oftentimes skip over, whether or not these allegations are true or not, there's only one story. There's only one thing that happened. Either happened or it didn't, right? But when these things sort of happen, we gloss over that, and we never return to it. We never came back. We never came back in Bill Cosby, to discussing what the cultural impact. I shouldn't say we. There were some pockets that did, yes, but I think mainstream outlets were more interested in what was going to happen to Bill Cosby. We're more interested in what's going to happen to Ezekiel Elliott. We're more interested in what's going to happen to Harvey Weinstein. We're more interested in what's going to happen to Kevin Spacey. I was going to say Kevin Bacon, but it's Kevin Spacey. These people, that's what we're interested in. What's going to happen to them? Maybe it's because of the high profile of these individuals that the conversation seems to take that turn. But whether or not Watson is guilty or innocent of these charges, and as somebody I think just mentioned on the Instagram, it's 50-50 at this point. Like, we don't, like, nobody knows anything. I agree with that. Nobody knows anything. But I think no matter which direction this ends up going, I think we would really do ourselves a disservice if we continually come to this situation, this kind of situation, and get this topic on a nationwide scale, and don't discuss changing the culture of sexual misconduct that happens all across this country. In small pockets, in big pockets, it's not always a celebrity. Sometimes it's just small, regular people that don't have a title, and that, that can't afford lawyers and press conferences and things like that. That's the culture, so to speak. The main sort of stories are just stories, right? These are something for us to bat around and say, do you think he did it, or do you think he didn't, right? Like, it's almost like water cooler conversation. But what about the culture that is causing these things to keep popping up? If we don't address it, it's not going to go anywhere, as we've often seen, as we saw this week, when we're discussing, violence against Asian American communities. People suddenly seem to realize the idea that if we don't stamp this out, then it won't go anywhere. This is one of those things that I believe is along those lines. If we don't stamp it out, it won't go anywhere. We don't have to be overly sensitive to these issues. We don't have to rush to judgment. And do I have my own personal opinions on what I think? Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I'll share them. I did think that it was weird this week hearing that, these allegations against Deshaun Watson, only because of what I knew about Deshaun Watson. And here's what I know about Deshaun Watson: that he plays football. I think he's like 6'4". He went to Clemson. I think this is his 4th season. I know stuff like that about Deshaun. He used to be coached by Bill O'Brien. He wants a trade. these are the things that I know about Deshaun Watson, football related things, right? Like, and I know about, maybe, he did a Campbell's commercial, or he did a, this, or a commercial, IBM commercial, or something like that, right? But these are the things that I quote unquote know about Deshaun Watson. I don't know that he's the kind of person that would never do this. I've never met the man a day in my life. And although that my limited, very narrow experiences with Deshaun Watson to this point, which have been centered, 99% around football, have been very positive to this point, doesn't mean that I know enough about this person or these situations to be able to definitively say, oh, this smells funny or this doesn't. From my limited view that I have that I know almost nothing from, yeah, sure, it smells a little funny to me. This one smells a little funny to me, but it's not my place to be like, Deshaun, man, we gotta rush in to defend Deshaun Watson because he's being railroaded by the system right now. Maybe that's true, but I don't know. And this is an issue that's serious enough that I think, those sort of pre-allegations that we can sometimes give out on comment sections, or, at dinner parties or dinner tables with our family and things like that, the opinions that can sort of spill out, those are the things that set the tone for the culture. What happened. There's only one story of what actually happened, but how we all react to it is what sets the culture. And I think that we have to be very intentional about how we set the culture as a way of as a way of helping, rather, to prevent these things from happening again. So that is my 2 cents, my 5 cents on that one. We did get a couple comments. As I mentioned earlier, 50-50 situation until more details come out. Word, I can totally understand that. And again, that should be every situation, right? Like it's a 50 from our perspective. The 99.9% who are not involved in the situation. Yes, it is a 50-50 proposition, as in there's only two things that could happen. Either what these women are saying happened, or it didn't. And from our perspective, we don't know. So it's a true 50-50 for us. It really is. Somewhere chilling, it's my homie John. He says, it's just not sitting right with me that he's never had no negative stories until he requested a trade. And that is that's what I talked about. My biases come where they come into play. And I'll be honest about how I feel about it. I initially, my initial reaction was, oh, I haven't heard. This is the first I've ever heard about something like this related to Deshaun Watson. So, the first initial thought is like, well, should I believe this, or should I even take stock in what's happening? But also, I mean, we just, this is what I also came from, again, with like prior situations. Have we learned from prior situations? I think in prior situations, what we glossed, one of the things that we, especially as men, did, I'm not saying me specifically, but I'm just saying us as men, what we did, I think, a little bit too quickly, is we didn't believe the stories that these women were telling. We almost made women have to prove their case as to why they were telling the truth. And that really doesn't line up with the data and the information that we have about sexual misconduct, that the overwhelming majority of reported sexual misconduct actually ends up being true, the overwhelming majority. And so I think from that perspective, I've had to try and retrain my thoughts, because that's immediately where my brain went. This is amazing. I've never heard anything about Deshaun Watson until right now. And this is this might be the most critical time of Deshaun Watson's professional career. What happens to him financially from here on out might very well hinge on what happens within the next couple of weeks here. And this is an interesting time to drop this lawsuit and information on this lawsuit. But again, checking my own biases, I have to make sure that I'm also, respecting the idea that, again, if I say that I think we should believe women, then I stand by that. I think that we should believe women. Frankly, I think we should believe women until something comes out that proves otherwise. Why would somebody come out of the woodworking to damage him? Yeah, maybe. But let's let those facts come out. Let's not just automatically assume that the women are lying until they can prove without a doubt that it absolutely did happen. I think that goes into, it's a subtle difference, but I think it goes into helping to craft, that better, sort of environment or yeah, I guess environment or culture that we have in this country as well. Cam said innocent until proven guilty. That's the time that we live in. Yeah, I mean it's definitely innocent until proven guilty, and certainly a note, an important note in the coverage here. No criminal charges have been filed. Houston area police have not received any sort of criminal charges yet, or any sort of report that would indicate that misconduct had happened within their jurisdiction yet. From a legal perspective, the lawyers say that that's what's next, and so within that process, absolutely, it's America. You're never guilty first. You're innocent until proven guilty within that case. So that's how the legal system is going to play out on that. And we know the legal system and sort of what actually happened don't always necessarily match up, but that's the way that that's the law that we have in this land. That's definitely the law that we had in this land. So let's see. One more comment we got in here. He says, well, what about the girl from Emmett Till? That's a great point. There is also this, culture, if you will, of sort of publicly lynching. Now, in the case of Emmett Till, that was a literal lynching and a public lynching, or and a figurative lynching. But now we talk about this, years later, about this woman who actually lied about what she accused Emmett Till of doing. And please research that if you're unfamiliar with the story. But I'm fully aware that happens as well. But as I mentioned before, the numbers and the data and the statistics from this tell us that the overwhelming majority of women that say, that report rather sexual misconduct are telling the truth. The overwhelming majority. It's not even close. And so while there is still a possibility, yeah, this all could be fabricated, this all could be made up, things that I typically happen more often than not, I typically tend to believe, right? Like if I close my eyes and I'm on the other side of the gym and Steph Curry shoots a free throw, and someone says that free throw went in, I know Steph Curry is like a 92% or 95% free throw shooter in my life. If somebody told me that Steph Curry made that free throw, I didn't see it, but they told me that he made the free throw, I'm going to believe it. That's the overwhelming majority of times that Steph Curry shoots a free throw, he makes it. So yeah, I'm going to believe the first time someone tells me that Steph Curry just made a free throw behind me. Yes, I'm going to believe them. And if a woman says that she's been sexually assaulted, or sexual misconduct has happened, I'm going to believe her, because the numbers say that an overwhelming majority of the time she's telling the truth. And I think our society and our culture still doesn't have that right just yet. So this story, especially with the celebrity endorsement that it has, just becomes juicy for a lot of people, which is unfortunate, instead of getting to the meat, so to speak, of the problem. But anyway, that's all the comments that I think that we've got for tonight. I appreciate the folks for joining me live on the show. Make sure you check out the show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 p.m. You can also check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook if you missed any episodes as well. YouTube.com/A Nicholsworth, Spotify, and Anchor. Just search A Nicholsworth as well. I'll be back on Monday for a fresh edition of A Nicholsworth, 8 o'clock sharp on the dot, unless, of course, I play basketball again. I had an old man moment last Wednesday. Look, man, it was just a lot. It was a lot on my body to play basketball and then start the show on time. I needed some break, but I appreciate that. Cam saying great show. Jonathan out there. I see you, Tweety Bird, and Studying Breed, I think, is on there as well. A bunch of people on the Instagram. I appreciate you as well. See you guys on Monday.